If you don't take responsibility for everything in your life, you will never grow as an individual. If you don't take responsibility for everything in your professional area of operations, your job security will always be in the air. And if you don't take responsibility for everything, you will never rightfully feel the elation of having a successful study. My name is Daniel Hermann O'Moran, and this is Class 2, Lesson 1B of the Clinical Operations Management Program. And this lesson will deal with the responsibilities of a manager. This is the syllabus for the complete Clinical Operations Management Program. The classes that are highlighted in yellow have been completed already, so that's Class 1. Right now we're on Class 2, the basics of management, and Lesson 1A and Lesson 1B deals with managers' responsibilities. By the way, this whole program I consider to be an example of project management, in that the goal has a definite time limit. An example of project management is called Agile project management, and that's what I'm using. Right now, the plan for the classes is Class 3 is managing a clinical operations team. The next class will be learning the study, then learning your sites. The next class will be monitoring visits. Class 6, I anticipate I'm going to be calling it Lanyap, meaning sort of like none of the above, but it's still important to include in the program. And the last one will be denouement, wrapping it all up. The purpose of this lesson, Part B, is to provide some explanation and clarification of what I said in Part A. I intentionally had Part A of this lesson be very brief because I wanted the pregnant brevity to hopefully attract some opposition or curiosity or thought, because that statement is kind of global and simple. My earlier video had 3 parts to it. The first one was within the manager's area of responsibility. What I mean by that is the area of responsibility that is defined by the job description of that manager, and especially to clinical operations, what is mandated by monitoring. ICHE 6 is on R3 now, but R2 had a very succinct and easy to read section on the job of monitoring. It's 5.18.4. And I know R2 has been superseded by R3, but R2 still has some good guidance in it. So the area of responsibility would be the job description 5.18.4. Also, you have the company's SOPs. That defines your area of responsibility and what you need to do. And within a study, you've got the protocol, all of the accompanying plans, like the monitoring plan, the safety plan, the recruitment plan, the communication plan, all of those. Those define your responsibility. So the second part of what I said in Part A of this lesson was that the manager is responsible for everything. So is that possible? Could one person be responsible for everything? The answer is yes, And the follow-up answer is yes and more. Not only are you responsible for the things that I listed earlier in this lesson, but you are responsible for everything that you hear in a meeting that affects you and your people, and you're responsible for everything that you read in emails that affect your area of responsibility. I maintain that the more that a person takes responsibility for, the greater the likelihood that that person will be successful in the project. The opposite would be to try to be responsible for as little as possible. And that would mean being as inactive as possible and replacing your activity with hope and good luck. That's not a good way to proceed for your career or for the conduct of the study. Being responsible for everything all the time is more work. But the payoff is that the more stuff that you get involved in, the better things will turn out for yourself, your team, and the study. I want to give a few examples of situations that I have been in that the group, the team, did have an ethos of everything all the time, and it worked. The first one was when I was a naval officer. One of the first things that almost everyone in the military is taught is that you're responsible for everything all the time. I was an officer, so that was especially true. Managers in the Navy are responsible for a lot of the things that managers in the civilian world are. Having the correct personnel allotment, making sure that the personnel have the right skills and the right knowledge to execute their job, to make sure that you have the right supplies, to make sure that you have the right material, to make sure that you have the right equipment and the equipment works. Those are things that all managers everywhere have responsibility for. But in the military, they made it even more clear that an officer is responsible for everything. True, we delegate a lot, but we're responsible for the execution of the delegation. Initially, it's uncomfortable to be a part of because it's overwhelming, especially as a junior young officer. Even though you've gone through a lot of training, the real world is different and it's fast. So it gets overwhelming because there's so many things that have to be dealt with immediately. But you learn it and you do it, and maybe someone once says, well, that wasn't my responsibility. Well, that really doesn't fly very far. So once you get used to the idea that you are responsible for everything all the time, you become more energetic and more vigilant and more circumspect. You look around you to find out, are things being done properly? Do we have the things that we need? Are people trained properly? And when there's a discrepancy, you fix it. You don't have a choice. You fix it. So that's the Navy. I also had a job as an operating room nurse at a state hospital that had a union workforce, 100% union workforce. The ethos on my unit was everything all the time. I was a part of the union, but not an active part, and I suspect that that perspective, everything all the time, is not consistent with the union perspective. But that was the culture of our unit. Everyone took responsibility for everything all the time. we took responsibility for supplies, making sure that we have them, they're stored properly, and they're brought to the operating room, when it's necessary. People would help out other nurses and other OR techs when it was clear that help was needed. It happened all over the place. Nurses would help out OR techs. The techs would help out the nurses when they could. Once everyone is on board with this ethos, it becomes a very, very nice, rewarding place to work. That is one of the positive outcomes. So the third part of what I said in part A of this lesson was all the time. So the United States is a big country. Most studies I've been in have had only one project manager and one CTM. But the chances are good that you are not in the same time zone as your supervisor or your direct reports. But that doesn't mean that because you're in a different time zone that your responsibility ends when you turn off your laptop. It doesn't. CTMs are responsible for what their CRAs do, even after the CTM has closed down the laptop. And that's the way it should be. I like the idea of CTMs and managers being available by phone all the time if there is a crisis or something that needs to be dealt with before the end of the day. It's one of the downsides of being a manager, but you have to suck it up and do what needs to be done. Answer the phone, help out your people. And on the soft, subjective side, you're responsible for everything that you hear and you read that affects your operation. In the Navy, we had an expression, silence is consent. So if you go to a meeting and something is said or something is proposed, if you don't raise your hand and object, what you're saying is that you concur and that you'll execute. So you need to pay attention at meetings. If you're a multitasker, stop multitasking in meetings. If you're only an hour long, pay attention during meetings. Take good notes. You're a professional. Do the right thing. And before I conclude the body of this presentation, I want to say that as managers, always as managers, and frequently in other roles, your responsibility extends beyond doing the actual work to making a plan for resolving the problem that exists, training the people who have to do the job, and if you're going to delegate it, follow up on the delegation to make sure the job has been done and done properly and successfully, and that the resolution is documented properly and that documentation is stored. A mistake that I made early in my Navy career was that I was told by my department head to do something. I assigned that task to someone else, and I thought that my role was finished. But my department head came to me a couple days later and asked whether I had followed up on that and whether that task had been done. And my response was, well, I told him to do it, which was a very ignorant junior officer thing to say. What I should have done was assign it and then made some kind of feedback loop about following up on it to make sure it was done properly. So that was an early career lesson learned for me, that follow-up is pretty important. A lot of quality work is addressed in the follow-up period. So in clinical research, almost everything important has to be documented. including email conversations that relate to the execution of the study. So part of the responsibility of most people, and especially managers, is the documentation of the action and the outcome. So that's another piece of the responsibility pie. So in summary, in this lesson, first of all, I defined what I meant in part A of this lesson of, first of all, what is meant by the area of responsibilities. Second, defining what I meant by everything. And third, what I meant by all the time. I reviewed that there are two types of guidance documents that would be helpful in this situation. First of all, those documents that apply to your employer's operation, your company. And then second of all, documents that apply to the study that you're working on. Next, I gave a couple of examples of situations where I've worked that the ethos of everything all the time has been effective. And lastly, I mentioned some of the reference documents that you could refer to get some explanation and clarification of what your responsibilities are. The first one for your company would be your job description and all of your SOPs that you've been trained on. And then the guidance documents within the study that you're working on. And those would be the protocol, all the plans that go under that protocol, like the monitoring plan and the project management plan. The next lesson will be Class 2, Lesson 2, and that will deal with the 3 steps of every management process.